Hello class, in this video we will be discussing virtualization. So let's get started. What is virtualization? Virtualization is replication of hardware to simulate a virtual machine inside a physical machine. Take a look at the picture over here. So you have your regular computer, your laptop or desktop, and then using software you will create a virtual computer inside your computer. In this example we have two over here. Whatever happens inside this virtual computer over here is isolated to this computer itself. What the virtualization software does is that it replicates the hardware that you have in your computer, such as your RAM, um, CPU, and hard drive, and it takes a portion of it and it assigns it to this virtual computer over here so that it can work. There are two general types of virtualization: server side or client side. The difference between the two of them is where the virtualization is taking place. So, an example of server-side virtualization will be virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, similar to what we have in the school with the ESXi host, with the ESXi software in the school, where the virtualization happens at the servers, and then when you log in, you receive a virtual machine that you can work and you can use. Um, some of the technologies that involve server-side, this type of server-side virtualizations are thin client or fat clients, thin clients, and zero clients. Let's take a look at the picture over here on the side. So this square over here represents the server where the virtualization is taking place. Then with a tablet or a smartphone, a client connects to the server, which provides the computing environment or the virtual machine. This one over here is one of the LG thin clients, similar to what you have in class. Now let's move along to client-side virtualization, since that is the type of virtualization that we're going to be doing for the rest of the course. Uh, Client-side virtualization happens when you use software installed on the computer to manage the virtual machines. Each virtual machine has its own operating system installed. And for client-side virtualization, the computer needs a hypervisor. A hypervisor is the software that you're using to creating and managing the virtual machines. You need hardware support. Your CPU needs to support the feature of creating virtual machines. You need enough RAM, you need enough memory, because these virtual machines are gonna take memory from your actual computer. And you need enough storage, obviously, because the virtual computer is gonna take a space from your actual hard drive. Now, generally there are two types of hypervisors. You have type 1 and type 2. Type 1 are hypervisors that run on hardware. They run directly on the hardware. For example, VMware, ESX and ESXi, which is what the school has, or the Citrix Sense server. Let's take a look at the illustrations over here. So you have the hypervisor that runs on the hardware and it virtualizes the application. Type 2, which is the one that we will be using, is software that runs on the host operating system. So you have your regular Windows PC or Mac, and you install a program on it. That program is the hypervisor, and that's the program that is going to be controlling and is going to be managing and creating virtual machines for you. Two big examples of these are VMware Workstation Player and Oracle VirtualBox, also Microsoft Hyper-V. Now, why virtualizing? What's the benefit of it? Well, for starters, virtualization allows running multiple computers on a single machine without needing to power off the computer and turn on the computer on a different partition of the hard drive. If you want to have a computer that has a Linux distribution, a Windows XP, a Windows 10, a Windows 8, and you want to have also a Mac OS computer in there, you can all do it with virtualization, assuming the computer is powerful enough to handle all of these virtual machines. Also, virtualization allows applications to be tested before installing them. Let's say, for example, that you downloaded a piece of software from the internet that you are not very sure about. You can create a virtual machine, install Windows on the virtual machine, run the application, and see if the application is harmful in any way. Since the virtual machine is isolated from your regular computer, from your host computer, then you know for a fact that it is safe to run the application in there because it's a closed environment. Virtualization reduces the cost by decreasing the physical hardware that must be purchased for a network. You might ask how? Well, since I can buy a single computer and run multiple computers in there. Let's say that I have a small office that needs a web server, a mail server, and a print server. Instead of me buying three computers, each and every one of them to do that feature, I can buy a single computer and virtualize three other operating systems to do that feature on that particular computer. In that way, I only buy one computer instead of buying three. It can go above that. Let's say, for example, that your office uses an old program that only ran on Windows 7, and then it has problems running on Windows 10. You can create a virtual machine of Windows 7, run the program in the virtual machine, and voila. Don't need to keep an old Windows 7 computer in your network. Instead, you can have a Windows 7 virtual machine inside a unique computer, that Windows 10 computer, and disconnect it completely if you want to isolate it from the network. Now, another thing is that virtualization offers the chance to experiment with untested programs without infecting host machines with viruses or malware. This also applies for developers that have a version of their application that they are working on and they want to test it on an isolated environment to avoid breaking their own environment. Create a virtual machine. Don't need to buy a new computer, just build one up. Let's move along. Now, let's talk about VirtualBox, which is the de facto software that we are going to be using all the time during this semester. VirtualBox is a powerful Type 2 virtualization product for enterprise and for home use as well. It's open source, released under GPL version 2. It runs on Windows, Linux, Macs, and Solaris, and it supports a very large number of guest operating systems. Now, a competitor to VirtualBox is a proprietary software called VMware Workstation Player. It's also a Type 2 hypervisor. It does in essence what VirtualBox does, but with more limited features. VMware Player is only available for Windows and Linux. However, there is a version of the VMware products called VMware Fusion available for Mac operating systems. Um, Workstation Player is featureless version of Workstation Pro. There are a lot of things that you can do on VirtualBox that you cannot do them in Workstation Player, which is the reason why I decided to use VirtualBox for this course instead of VMware Player. Um, if you want to take a look at the real comparisons, you can do a quick research online about which one of the two softwares is better for you in case that you don't want to use VirtualBox and you want to use Workstation Player instead. You can also use Hyper-V if you I don't know if you want to play around with it, if you want to do your own research on the side. I'm not against it as long as you have a Linux environment that you can 100% control. I am good for the course. Uh, if you have any questions about VirtualBox or Workstation Player, you can also reach out on Discord. I run both of them, so I'll be able to help you out with any of them. I don't have a Windows computer where I have Hyper-V installed, since Microsoft Hyper-V is only available for Windows. So, I can help you out, but my help will be pretty limited to what we can find out. Now, the big question here is, can your computer run virtual machines? Can your computer virtualize? Well, if your computer has AMD V or Intel V compatible processor, all the I series are, then your computer is probably good enough on the processor side. I recommend at least a quad-core processor, although VMware Player and VirtualBox they do say that a dual-core 64 bits processor is enough. I have had better experience with a quad core. The more cores, the better. 4 gigabytes of RAM, but that is relative because if you are, for example, virtualizing Ubuntu desktop with a GNOME desktop environment, and you only have 4 gigs of RAM on your personal computer, it's gonna be tough for you. You're gonna have a pretty uh, mediocre virtualization experience. I recommend 8 gigs of more or more. However, if you only have 4 gigs of RAM, I might be able to give you some pointers on what to optimize to run a virtual machine properly. But again, expect the slowdowns. It's not gonna be a very good experience. And at the end of the day, if you have a computer with 4 gigs of RAM or less and you're running Windows 10, I suggest you to upgrade. Upgrade the RAM or upgrade to a better computer because Windows 10 doesn't run really well on 4 gigs of RAM. I mean, even if you have a solid state drive on your Windows 10 machine, 4 gigs of RAM is pretty little. think for a second. If you have Google Chrome, for example, style, and you're running Google Chrome and Microsoft Word at the same time, your operating system is already taking at least 700 megabytes of RAM, at least as a minimum, and that's a stripped down version of Windows. Most of the time, Windows takes at least 1 gig of your RAM. That leaves you with three. Most of the time, Chrome takes a lot of RAM, 1 gig, sometimes even 2 gigs of RAM. Let's assume in a perfect scenario that Google Chrome is only eating 1 gigs of your RAM. Now you only have 2 gigs of RAM for moving applications around. Then you launch applications like you want to listen to some music and you want to edit the document. You don't have a space to virtualize. That's how much you got. So I genuinely recommend that at least 8 gigs of RAM, 6 gigs of RAM might do something, but I must recommend 8 and at least a solid state drive. Um, you also need enough hard drive space because each and every one of these operating systems will require a space because they require a virtual hard drive. I recommend to have at least 50 gigabytes of space that you can spare, and that will be enough for the entire course. If you have any questions regarding virtualizations, you can actually tune into one of the workshops that we're going to be having, or you can ask them in Discord. You can send an email, you can ask around, you can research and watch a couple of videos online as well. This is not a course on virtualization. This is a course on Linux, but it is important that we touch this because we are going to be using VirtualBox a lot. And if you're going to use a tool, you need to know what the tool is and what its capabilities are. It's just it's just common knowledge. It's just good to know. Okay, this is the end of this video. I'll see you in the next video when we're gonna be creating a couple of virtual machines using VirtualBox. See you then.